Welcome, everybody. I am joined by Ben from West Michigan Transformers on YouTube once again, and we are here to talk about the Fellowship of the Ring meta. So we're going to cover kind of how to build a deck, what are the good decks in Fellowship, what cards to kind of think about. We're going to try to keep it under a half hour this time, I promise. And also, if you're looking for more stuff, you should absolutely go check out his channel, like and subscribe, all this stuff, because he has more videos there, much longer, much more in depth, and he's actually way better at this game than me. So, Ben, did I miss anything?
I don't know how much you've played. We have to play each other, then we'll know.
Sure. Yeah, that's the only true way to know. So let's talk Fellowship block. So it's the first block.
Yeah.
And when you're playing this game, we've talked about this in the last video, right? But you're essentially playing two games in one. You want to protect your Frodo. Frodo is a vulnerable little hobbit. He is not, a strong, fortified character. And you're also trying to knock out your opponent's Frodo. So you're kind of playing two games in one.
Yep. And it's really interesting in terms of protecting your Frodo. That's like a defensive thing. You're thinking of trying to hold back the forces of evil. But the Fellowship side really serves an offensive purpose because you're trying to make it down the adventure path first.
It's always a race, right? It's a race to the finish, essentially.
Yeah. So I compare it to, American football. The offense has to protect the ball, but they also have to get it down the field. They're the ones mostly responsible for scoring the points.
I appreciate you calling it American football for our one international viewer, right? So I'm glad that we got it.
Yeah. So then, Shadow side, they're mean, like ugly, aggressive, strong, powerful, but they're really the defenders in the game. They're trying to stop your opponent from getting down the field before you do. So you have to sort of consider keeping on task, getting down the field as you're building your deck, for sure.
Okay. So what are some of the big things with Fellowship? So do you want to start with Shadow first, maybe?
Yeah. So we're going to talk about the meta here, and I think one of the best resources, there's a list on the Last Homely House forums with the first World Tournament from 2002 in Fellowship Block of the top 16 decks from day 3, including like who won, who came in second place. And that gives us a really good snapshot of what was going on in first block, at least at the time. In terms of shadows, 13 out of those 16 decks were Isengard. They were Uruk-hai. So clearly there's a meta precedent for it. Like we can see by the numbers, Isengard is in charge. So I'm going to pull up the cards here. There were 3 like really important cards for the Uruk-hai strategy. One was Savagery to match their numbers. This gives you for a very hello there.
She just broke in. Please stay on.
If you can spot a cat, yes. So you get just a really easy cost for being able to get the second ability on this card. Even if you're using the first one, it's a nice strength +2 for 0 Twilight. But if you get 5 companions, you make your Uruk-hai strength +4 and fierce. I don't know that there's any other event which gives. Oh, there's one in Dunland in Towers Block. But anyways, keeping that strength going into the fierce skirmish is brutal. You have the Uruk Ravager. When you play this minion, you may spot Saruman to add 2. So if Saruman is big news, then this guy is going to be big news. Oh yes, so Saruman, Keeper of Isengard. He, like most versions of Saruman, doesn't get involved in the fights, which protects him from getting killed by Gimli with a rough battle axe. He functions like a condition that way. So you're really relying on his abilities. He makes all of your Uruk-hai fierce, so they go in for multiple skirmishes, which is particularly devastating for Isengard because they all have damage bonuses. So you're turning one minion into a machine that on a single site does 4 wounds. And then the other part of Saruman is he can protect your minions from getting wounded before the skirmish phase, or even during it. One of the best answers to Isengard is archery maneuver wounding. So Saruman sort of fills in that gap and protects them the way that they need. I would say that even if Sauron wasn't allowed in first block, and the Uruk Ravager and Savagery to match their numbers, you would still have an advantage in Isengard, just because of the way they're built. So looking ahead to this guy, this is a counterexample from Moria, the Goblin Scavengers. This guy costs 3. He has 8 strength, 1 vitality. He does have a special ability, but let's compare him to sort of a standard Uruk from Isengard. This is the Uruk Warrior. He costs 3, but has 9 strength, 2 vitality, damage +1, and then still has an ability on top of that. Um, from a design reason, I think you're allowed to get away with that because the Goblin Scavenger's ability here is the basis for like a machine in Moria. But really, that machine takes some time to set up. He's not necessarily ready to go right when he wakes up, rolls out of bed. Whereas the Uruk Warrior, if you had no other card in your hand and you just played this guy, I mean, all other things being equal, you have a Strength 9 minion who can survive at least 1 archery, give you a damage bonus, and maybe be fierce. He's not the only one. Let's look at the Uruk Captain, cost 3, 9 attack, damage +1, 2 vitality. Can play Uruk-hai from your discard pile. All right. So recursion is great. The Uruk Lieutenant, he costs 3. He's strength 8, but strength +1 for each other Uruk-hai you can spot. So effectively, very likely going to be strength 9 and above. Here's something a little out of left field. The Troop of Uruk-hai, more expensive, but a character skirmishing this minion does not gain strength bonuses from weapons. Also notice the 4 vitality. This guy is mean because one of the key strengths of the free people side is their permanence. When you put a card down in Fellowship, it on the free people side it stays down. So weapons are really important to a good free people strategy, and this minion specifically takes that strength away from you. And then minions win ties. So at a base of 9, taking away weapons, it's really hard to take this guy down. And then some maybe B tier Uruk-hai, but still just rough to play around with. We have Uruk Rager, costs 4, can discard cards off of the top of the draw deck, which is annoying. Uruk Slayer, remove 1 to make this minion strength +1 for a limit of +3. So if there's extra Twilight out there, he's got his own built-in skirmish machine. Uruk-hai Raiding Party, I actually really like this card. No special abilities, but along with the damage +1, you have that 3 vitality, so he can soak up the archery wounds really well. What it comes down to is Isengard just has the best stats. They're made to be individual soldiers, and that damage +1 is so important for putting wounds on the opposing fellowship. So if you're looking to roll right into the meta, pull out the Uruk-hai, and it doesn't matter if you don't have like the rare cards yet, like the top tier Isengard cards. They'll all work. They're great. Yeah, can't
This has
recommend them
been
enough.
really fun looking at a bunch of pictures of Uruk-hai. Like I haven't really thought about what an Uruk-hai looks like, but I've just like looked at 10 pictures of them and I'm like, wow, this is just like the most intimate glance into Uruk-hai I've ever had in my life. So just getting my
Yeah,
full dose of like Uruk-hai today.
they're
Um,
muscular, they're armored, but weak beneath the neck.
God, that I remember that. Yeah. Okay, so Uruk-hai probably the best. Is it also kind of the easiest to pick up as far as like strategies for new folks?
Yeah, I
Since they're big
mean,
and meaty and like it's not that
right,
complicated.
and I don't mean to demean that. Like you can still have plenty of like sophisticated thought behind your deck as you build Uruk-hai, but they feel good. You drop them on the table, they will accomplish things for you, and they are simple to roll out. Again, Aragorn's starter deck gives you a good basis for starting off with them. You just add a few cards, bring yourself up to the standard 30, and that's a great start.
Okay. All right.
So,
What
yeah,
else we
go
get for
ahead.
shadows?
So, probably in second place is the Moria strategy, which their sort of crown achievement is going for the minion swarm, where they're trying to reach around your opponent's fellowship by having more minions than your opposing companions. That way, they can assign the extra minions to Frodo for the overwhelm and game-ending knockout. Um, in that regard, they work really well. They're Twilight efficient, so they're not very expensive. And then they also have a lot of like recursion abilities, so you can arguably get more Moria Orcs out in play than your hand would normally allow. This is a great example of a card that builds that machine up. So when an orc wins, you put them on this card, save them for later, like other turns. Most of the time, again, minions go away at the end. So this saves Moria Orcs up for later, extends the hand really well. They are coming. This is a little expensive. Discard 3 cards from hand to play an Moria Orc from your discard pile. But Moria is also quite capable of doing card draw. So you can extend your hand and then get rid of redundant fellowship cards, and then again bring minions out of your discard pile. So this is a good card for Moria. And then the Goblin Armory.
This is
This
like
is
the big chase card.
yeah. Yeah, this is the central cog in like a Moria like monster build-up deck. So each time you play a weapon, add 1 Twilight. And then if an orc is about to take a wound, discard this condition to prevent that wound. So basic thought, stock up your deck with like Goblin Scimitars, Moria Axes. I have some pictures of those later. But then Goblin Scavengers, which can play the weapons from your discard pile. This is on the board. It'll make the weapons either free or better than free, give you Twilight for it. And then the Goblin Scimitar draws cards for you. The Moria Axe lets you beast. And then you're extending your hand, adding Twilight.
Because
This
you
is
can
just
stack these, right? You could have 2 out, right, at the same time.
exactly. Yep. So if you have 2 out, you would add 2 Twilight for playing 1 weapon. And then the bottom thing here is good against archery. Moria Orcs are squishy against archery, so that's important. Yeah, here's a Goblin Scimitar. When you play his possession, you may draw a card. That's one of the big things. And the bigger your Moria deck goes, the more you want the draw power. The Moria Axe gives the Moria Orcs a damage bonus. That's cool. Exert Bear to make him strength +2. There are a few Moria Orcs out there with a bunch of vitality, so they really benefit from having this. Okay, Goblin Runner. What is this? When you play this minion, you may add 2. This guy costs -1. Yeah. You stock 4 of him in your deck. Goblin Wall Crawler protects you from archery, gets some strength at underground sites. The Moria Scout, you're usually in Fellowship Block going to see an elf, at least Legolas. Not unusual to see a bunch of elf allies too. So oftentimes the Moria Scout plays for free. And in a shadow culture that really lacks vitality, that 1 little extra is helpful. And then the Goblin Scavengers. We looked at these guys. We compared them unfavorably to the Uruk Warriors. But when you play this minion, you may play a weapon from your discard pile on your Moria Orc. So there's that recursion, that hand extension. Play this guy, get a Goblin Scimitar to make an orc stronger, draw a card, see what happens next. So this is important. Host of Thousands, play an orc from your discard pile. So if there's an orc you prefer most of all, this effectively can run your total up to like 8 copies instead of just the 4. I love this one. And then that's about the meta. I just threw in one other guy, the Moria Archer Troop. There are other strategies
I don't think
with
I've ever
Moria.
seen that picture before. That's a cool picture.
Yeah. So this is a different kind of card efficiency. I mean, so 6 Twilight for 8 strength is sad. But he's an archer who can spot another archer to add yet another archery to the total. So he gives you like multiple archery out of 1 card, and therefore in a Moria Archer deck, like this is sort of the cornerstone card. I just like Moria Archery. I want to throw that in there. This guy is not in the meta at all. Don't mind me. Okay. Let's move on if we can. So
Sure.
Nazgul. This guy, regardless of whether you're running a Nazgul deck, is a worthy inclusion in Fellowship Block in any shadow side. So he makes the sort of artificial speed limit for fellowships, spot 6 companions or 5 burdens, and exert Ulere Enquie to wound a companion. So with 4 vitality, he can exert up to 3 times and deal out 3 wounds to your opponent's most important companion. Um, if you got Frodo on the board, sorry, not Frodo. You can't wound Frodo, not the ring bearer. If you have Aragorn on the board, 4 vitality, but he has a wound already, Enquay is going to line up and shoot him during the maneuver phase. So as your deck building, just knowing this guy is out there, um, he influences the way you think about building your free people side. You think about who are my 5 most important companions, and if it's time to build beyond that, am I willing to pay the cost of seeing this guy come out here and take out like whichever character my opponent hates the most? Um, this guy has staying power in like all formats, so yeah, just a mean brute. And then even if you don't spot the 6 companions, 4 vitality, 11 strength, fierce, so you're gonna fight him twice. He's a good body. So yeah, shotgun Enquay, the terror of the Nazgul. If you are running a Nazgul deck, I've really enjoyed it since I've been playing the game, and I realized that was a thing you could do. Um, in the first 2 series, Nazgul are only uncommons and rares, so building an entire Nazgul strategy is kind of a trading buying accomplishment. You have to invest in getting to it. So when you do, it feels like, oh, I've really committed to this game. And the fun factor is just the Nazgul are super powerful. They have all kinds of interesting tricks up their sleeve. So drawn to its power, this is like, for my money, the main engine of a good Nazgul deck. Just a really simple way to add burdens. If you can put 4 of this in your deck, again, the ability stacks with each copy that you have. So if you have 3 drawn to its power, then as soon as 1 companion dies in a skirmish, you're going to add 3 burdens to Frodo. The Nazgul gets stronger as burdens are added, which is really important. And then you can also play chess, where your opponent has to decide A, between protecting Frodo from like getting overwhelmed, but B, protecting your other companions, because if too many die, Frodo just might get corrupted outright, like reach that 10 burden threshold. So this is important in the meta. And then Morgul Gates, play a Nazgul, his Twilight cost is -2. Simple, effective. Nazgul are expensive. This is not.
Also, it's free. Yeah, that's great. I
Yeah.
know it's free.
Yep. Obviously, events don't have like a roaming penalty either. So on site 2, you just play that out for 0, and then your Nazgul is -2. The good thing about Nazgul is all of them stop roaming at site 3 anyhow, so that's not an important thing. But at any rate, this will take 2 off of like the standard cost of a Nazgul, whatever you're paying for him. So this is, Twilight efficiency. Then there are I'd mentioned Nazgul get more powerful the more burdens they have. So let's look at some really nasty stuff. Toldier, spot 4 burdens to assign a companion to skirmish Uller Toldier. So if you have like that drawn to its power engine ready, you spot Toldier and you can just target a Hobbit like Pippin or Merry, 3 or 5 strength. Just overwhelm them, add 3 burdens, be mean. It's a little difficult if you don't spot the 4 burdens. That's one of the weaknesses of the Nazgul, is if your opponent didn't give you a lot to begin with, it can be hard to get the engine running. You can consider ways to add burdens outside of their sphere of influence. Twilight Nazgul are pretty good at that. There are options, but yeah, you want those 4 burdens out there. And then Nelia, he just needs 2 burdens, and then he functions as an Uruk-hai, really. So fierce and damage +1. For 5 Twilight, you're getting 3 vitality and then 10 power. And notice this guy stops roaming as soon as site 2. He's cool. You never have to worry about him being roaming. And then just throwing out 4 wounds in a turn is bonkers.
Yeah.
And then at TA, remove 1 to make him strength +1 up to a limit of +5. If your hand is weak, like you only have a few Nazgul cards, but you have this guy down there, he can turn a bad situation into a fairly decent one. Become as strong as the Balrog, steamroll over companions. And Cantier. So exert Uller Cantier to discard a weapon borne by a character he is skirmishing. Toss away Hobbit swords, toss away Aragorn's weapon, Glamdring, so on and so forth. A really cool control kind of a character. Yeah. So I know I got to keep kind of moving on here. So I just want to talk about Sauron culture really quick. There's sadly not too much to say. They haven't performed well historically. They have like three branches, um, at least three. There are trackers and like tracker conditions, card draw, exertion, etc. And then, sort of dovetailing into that, they have a strategy of condition based exertion and wounding with like Mordor bowmen. I'm forgetting the name of it. Spawn orc. You get an archery, stack them. You could have like four. Um, and then a bunch of like really mean cards. And then in Realm of the Elf Lords, especially, the third big strategy for Sauron is like deck and hand milling, like discarding your opponent's resources. The problem with like all of that is the more conditions, events, support cards you put into your deck, the fewer minions you have. Um, and then the minions are kind of weak in Sauron culture, so you don't mount a strong offensive. Two cards to note: Forces of Mordor. You could ignore sort of the strategies that Decipher sets you up with in first block and try instead to just set up a Sauron Orc Swarm. In that case, Forces of Mordor is a really powerful card. You spot as many Sauron minions to add, what have you. I think there's an errata to limit this to 4, so you can only add 4, but that's enough. So this is a good Swarm card. It is already restricted in first block, so you're only actually allowed to have 1 copy in your deck, but it's great. And then Tower Assassin, even though you're probably not running Sauron cards in a competitive environment, this is a good play to mix in with your characters because free people's allies are such a big thing. So he targets them. Okay, so
On to the free people.
yeah, on to the free peoples.
So just real quick conclusion, there's 4 major cultures to kind of consider with the shadows, and we kind of went in ranks. So that's sort of like strongest to least strong.
Yeah.
Okay, got it.
And I would just say really quickly, when talking about meta, recognizing what the most powerful thing is not the same thing as criticizing what the apparently weaker strategies are. Like, it's not a mistake to use something else. You get the surprise factor for one thing, and just, I mean, you're in control of your game. If you want to find like something that really speaks to you and then find a way to make it competitive, to me that's like a really good feeling. I love running the Nazgul. To me, they feel powerful, and whatever else anyone says, it's okay.
So I see Sam. Tell me about
Yes.
Sam. This is like actually one of the best cards in the game, isn't it? Right? They like errated
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. So I think we talked maybe in the other video. I got to make a decision. Am I going first or am I going second? And then you tailor your deck that direction. To go first reliably, you have to bid a lot of burdens. And then one of the ways to take away the sting of having put so many burdens on is this guy who has the best burden removal engine in the game. You just exert him, take a burden off. He has 4 vitality, heal him on a sanctuary, rinse, repeat. Or you could start with this guy alongside Frodo, feed Frodo to the wolves, pass the ring on to Frodo, and look, 0 burdens. So every version of Sam in first block has, if Frodo dies, make Sam the ring bearer. So in a deck that wants to go first, bid high, either start Sam in your starting fellowship or potentially run the Site 1 Green Dragon in, exert a Hobbit, play Sam from your draw deck, and then, again, you can just remove the burns off of there. So he's the most important Sam. We got a little out of order there. Okay, Aragorn. I will say that in Fellowship block, in terms of being competitive, and really in terms of being thematic, you want some version of Aragorn in every deck. He's the champion fighter. He has the highest core strength at 8. He's got the 4 vitality, and each version has a really strong ability. In the meta, this is the most prominent guy. This is an understated ability, removing 2 Twilight, but it pays dividends. And then I was showing these other cards. You can stack into a choke strategy where you're stealing Twilight from your opponent. So No Stranger to the Shadows makes site numbers cost less. Hobbits can help contribute to that same idea. So choke, it's frustrating to play against, but it's powerful. So yeah, if you want to go there, totally you
So it's
can.
more for that control, I guess, right? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, it's a very control strategy. Um, Limit your opponent's resources, build up your own stuff, get stronger and stronger, and eventually your opponent just can't quite keep up. In this game, I will say, as you get onto later sites, there is a good like power stacking where the shadow side has the ability to get stronger. You get a lot more resources as sites go on, and the sites get mean. I mean, they're all mean. Anyways, if you're using Aragorn, and you should be, then he has a lot of fun toys. Aragorn's bow makes him an archer, lets you target minions directly, rather like Enquie. Ranger's sword, give him a damage bonus and some strength, permanent boost. Flaming brand. Um, Even if you're not seeing a lot of Nazguls, you're probably seeing Enquie. So this is just a free weapon born in addition to another hand weapon, so it doesn't take away from anything. And then against a Nazgul, you're suddenly a total of strength +3 and damage +1.
So it's a
Um,
good just general hedge, right? Against like if they're running Nazgul to have.
yeah, and it's great for like if you're running Dagger Strike in your deck, it gives your Gondor characters another way to access having a hand weapon, and even that +1 that can be
Yeah.
the difference. Yeah. Okay. So broadly speaking, in Fellowship Block, I think the strongest meta is again turning into the companions who are part of the Fellowship proper. Here's another example: Legolas Greenleaf. Possibly throughout the entirety of the game, the most powerful version of Legolas can target whoever he wants, take him out. Again, very much like Enquie, but just for the free peoples. And then I'm going to mention Arwen. She's sort of the representative companion of what we might call the Super Friends deck. In Star Wars terminology, we'd say mains and toys. So Aragorn, Arwen, maybe Gimli, Gandalf have a lot of really cool possessions, and free peoples benefit from having permanent things on the board. Arwen has Asphalloth, her horse, and then she has Gwemagil, her sword, and then there are other fun elf cards you can stack on. So as the game progresses and you get more resources, she just can become a juggernaut. Uh, then elves, broadly speaking, one of the best things in the Fellowship block is the elf allies. Elrond is a great example. He lets you draw a card for each exertion you put on him. So the turn you put him down, just exert him 3 times, draw 3 cards, which is the game is 2 decks in one. Your hand can be really awkward. You can be stuck with fewer of like whichever side of the game you're playing in that moment than you want to have. So really one of the best ways to get around that is just to increase your hand size. Um,
And
Yeah,
then
card
he
draw is
heals him.
important in any game, but
I guess I've never actually read his text. He heals himself at the end of each of your turns, right? Heal every ally whose home is 3.
right. And then there are other elf, allies at home 3 too, so he has benefit for them. But after you've played him, then yes, on the next turn, now you can draw another card because you've healed him again. And if you go for elf healing, then I mean, you give him further opportunity. Looking at more elf allies, here's Galadriel. Why is she broken? Because we can exert Galadriel to play an elf for free. Elf allies, elf companions, whatever you're playing, she just takes their twilight away. And then again, at the start of each of your turns, heal every ally whose home is site 6. I think that's super important because we have these guys. Orphan takes out Uruk-hai. You want that. Rumil takes out orcs. Caliglin takes out minions during the regroup phase. So there are these really powerful Site 6 elf allies, and Galadriel just really benefits them. And then allies in general benefit from this is kind of a sidebar strategy. You can build a deck around a card like this, Horn of Boromir. He lets allies go out and fight on sites that are not their own home sites. And there are other cards for this, like One Who Men Would Follow, Swanship of the Galadrim, et cetera, et cetera. There's a rule where you can only have 9 companions in your fellowship, including the companions who've already died. Cards like this increase your numbers, so you can just throw bodies at the opponent's minion pool and really take advantage of the fact that, again, your opponent can only ever have 8 cards in their hand until they draw or extend or what have
Mhm.
you. So this is I would say it's a part of the meta. It's maybe not at the very top, but like that's just a whole nother strategy you can get into. Yeah, here's our one who men would follow. Okay, then maybe the last few considerations. You want to have support for your hobbits, especially for Frodo, even if he is the only hobbit. Um, and just as a general rule, you want to build your deck with the strongest, like the most amount of cards geared towards whichever companions you know you're starting with, those who are in your starting fellowship, and then whoever you plan to draw with your site one, whether that's Aragorn or Sam, or maybe even Merry and Pippin. Um, Shire cards all fit into that rule because you always have one Shire companion at the very least, and that companion is Frodo. If you don't have Frodo or Sam, you're dead. So Sting can let you look at an opponent's hand during the regroup phase or the fellowship phase, so you can plan out whether you want to do a double move. And then if your opponent is running orcs, you can steal Twilight from the pool. And then he's got that +2, really helps him like hide away from getting overwhelmed. Then stealth events. These are also kind of control cards, very trollish. At sites 1 to 5, cancel a skirmish involving a hobbit. At any other site, make a hobbit strength +2. The point of this one is, again, throw your hobbit out. Even if it's Frodo, you can get risky. Throw Frodo out at your opponent's strongest minion. At sites 1 to 5, throw this down. You've satisfied the assignment. The fight's over. Nothing happened. Yeah, this is a great card. And its brother, Hobbit Intuition, only works at sites 1 to 4. So Hobbit Stealth might be a little stronger, but the trade-off is you get a strength +3 later on. I like this one. This one speaks to me. But I mean, run 4 copies of both. if that's the direction you're going. Bounder, exert this ally to prevent a hobbit from being overwhelmed unless that hobbit's strength is tripled. So throwing a few copies of these at a crucial moment where Frodo needs it, he saves him from getting destroyed. Boromir, as a splash companion, exert Boromir to make a hobbit strength +3. Thematically, this feels great. It's like Frodo protecting Merry and Pippin at the end of the first part of the story. But this really is a good protection for Frodo too. This can also, if you go that way, turn your hobbits into warriors. It's an option. Then I think we have 2 more cards to look at. Gandalf. I was saying earlier, in Fellowship Block, probably the most competitive deck build is to include members like from across the Fellowship proper. So, Merry, Pippin, Frodo, Sam, Aragorn, Legolas, Gimli, etc., etc. Gandalf obviously is part of that. It is hard to build a deck around Gandalf because there's not a version of Site 1 that plays him from your deck. And then he has that 4 Twilight cost. So if he's in your starting fellowship, it's just him and Frodo.
Yeah, he's the
And
whole thing.
yeah, no matter how awesome your deck is, and it could very well be very awesome, Frodo only has Gandalf next to his side at the beginning. It's possible you get a bad draw and you move on to Site 3. Your opponent plays a few Moria orcs, and through no fault of your own, Frodo's just dead. So competitively speaking, we can put asterisks around that, but competitively speaking, Gandalf works best probably as a splash companion. If you draw him later down the road, here's a guy with 4 vitality and 7 strength, and then some cool abilities. So this guy gives you more card advantage at the start of each of your turns. You may draw a card. And then Gandalf, Friend of the Shire Folk. If you really, really are going for that full fellowship strategy, he benefits from it. So if you spot a hobbit, a dwarf, an elf, and a man, he's strength +1 for each of them. So without any other support on Gandalf, if you have the rest of the fellowship out there, he's strength 10. So like card efficiency, 1 card in your deck, throw him down. Here's a guy for 10 strength.
So it's interesting. So really, the meta for Fellowship is a lot less of like building a deck around Gondor, right? It's more like the stronger diversity of Fellowship is maybe like a general strategy.
Yes. There's a lot of monoculture support in the first block. Like they point you that direction. You can have a full playset of Elven bows and play Heldir and Arwen and Legolas and like 4 Lorien elves. Sorry. throw them out there with all their bows and like stack the archery. That feels awesome. Lorien elves are really, really killable, so that's a problem. Um, the strongest monoculture deck is dwarves. So you have like 4 unique companions: Gimli, Glowin, Fror, and Farron, and they've got some really cool abilities. They also have fantastic support cards. Like you can stack multiple axes on them. They have the best skirmish events in the block. A dwarf deck feels really good. It's close to competitive, and like you can try that out. But I think, like broadly speaking, the strongest fellowship is one that can accomplish multiple things well. And because each of the companions are so thematically well defined and they feel like who they're supposed to be and they're important to the story, each one adds a little something to the machine and gives you like a wide variety of answers to whatever your opponent is doing. Um, I will say probably the most important function of a good Free People side is its ability to get rid of minions, finding a way to discard them, kill them in the skirmish phase, archery, etc. And just looking over our Free People's companions, like look back at Legolas. He's an archer. He can snipe guys for you. Even if he doesn't, he throws out 1 archery. Someone's got a wound. If they lose to a companion, even for 1 wound, they might just die. Gimli's got that. Oh, I don't have Gimli in this list. Oh, well,
It's right.
Gimli's got a built-in damage bonus. So, like, again, he wins a skirmish. He knocks 2 people out. But then, Aragorn, you can play a sword on him. He can give you that damage bonus. Boromir has some good like toys for that. Gandalf does. And then it's great to support your ring bearer. That also supports your hobbits. So yeah, again, the main companions of the fellowship all add lots of different things, and somehow that stacks well. They work well as a team together.
Cool. So I think you had one last thing you want to show us, maybe a deck that you'd put together. I think we're
Yeah.
low on
Let's
time
look at this
to see
real quick. So I've talked about the meta, and this is not a meta deck, okay? That's all right. Let me pull this guy up. Okay, so you can still see?
Yep.
Okay, cool. Imagine if you went for saying like that hardest mountain to climb, and you want to build a deck around Gandalf. Okay, so Gandalf is in our starting fellowship because there's no way to draw him. You could go the route of like putting 4 copies in, but then there's just no guarantee of getting him. So a deck like this is a full fellowship deck, and what we're going to do is rely on Gandalf's card draw ability um, to get companions as quickly as possible. I'd probably run the Prancing Pony to get Aragorn. And then I'm just looking at Gandalf signets. Frodo's got one: Aragorn, Gimli, Legolas, Pippin, Sam. And that's going to key off well with Trust Me As You Once Did. This is one of those really good full fellowship, they all support each other kind of cards, because the more companions you have out with a Gandalf signet, the more powerful this becomes. And then Gandalf support, like the weapons, this really cool staff which can cancel skirmishes and make events cheaper. Strength of Spirit will key really well off of Trust Me As You Once Did. Intimidate prevents wounds. Mysterious Wizard gives Gandalf that strength bonus. And then I told you Aragorn wants his main possessions. So Aragorn's bow, Ranger's sword, flaming brand. Then we have Legolas. Here's not the meta one, but I like that Gandalf signet. And then some Hobbit support. So Hobbit stealth to protect Frodo. Bounder. Bounder can get healed after saving a Hobbit via Frodo's ability. You've got some Hobbit swords that might work really well with Merry. And broadly, almost by accident, this deck has a lot of characters who exert to give you abilities. Aragorn can exert to protect you from a Moria swarm. Gimli exerts just without any other support to turn himself into a tank. Sam can exert to make himself defender +1. Merry exerts to provide his strength to other companions. So the power of this deck, like the way these companions support each other, is really already built into like who they are as companions, and then you don't have to give them a lot besides. And then that gives us a good reason for having Strength of Spirit. So here I've said this is a non-meta deck. This isn't what's going to necessarily win you a tournament, but I think there are like there's potential to this deck, like to play testing, to fine tuning, and there's a definite strategic angle. So what I would do with this deck is bid 0 burdens, let your opponent go first. There's a good chance they're going to play the Prancing Pony anyways. So, yay. If they don't, they're probably running Green Dragon in. So, there's Sam for you. Yeah, you're just relying on your opponent to give you the chance to give you a companion. But then this deck, even though it's stocky and it's unwieldy at first, the advantage is it gets very powerful as the game goes on and as you get the full support engine going. um, so it's a game that, I mean, it's a deck that lets you go further on in the game and then really gain steam as you go. So this is a go second deck, and then maybe build a shadow side like Moria that lets you get card draw actually, so that you can build into your fellowship well, and then stack your sites so that Moria is really well supported. Moria has some fantastic support sites that you can go for. So I think again, you can go with like a hard setup, something that's really difficult, and then have fun making it as strategic as possible, and it can definitely surprise you. Yeah, that's about all I have to say about that one.
Yeah, this has been really interesting, and like a crash course in sort of the strategies. Do you have another? Do you have a shadow side one, or is this the
Uh,
last?
I didn't put one together, no, but
Oh, okay, okay. I'm gonna bring us back together. Um, so this is I feel like I'm already better at the game just listening to you talk about it, and I kind
hey,
of want to go build the deck. So I think this is going to be something we're going to do for Two Towers and then possibly Return of the King as well if folks want it. Please feel free to leave in the comments, other types of things, video playing content that you might want or might be of interest or you feel like it's missing. I know this is kind of in depth. We're happy to also try to answer questions, but Ben has a lot of great videos that are a lot longer
well,
on
thanks.
his YouTube as well. You should go check those out. There is this kind of burgeoning little community of people that are getting back into this that never left it, right? So
Yeah, yeah.
if you're sitting at home trying to figure this stuff out, you are not alone, right? Like there's other people that are interested in this. So fundamentally, this is might be out of print, but it doesn't mean it has to go away completely.
Hey, this whole process has been a ton of fun. So thanks for having me on. This has been great.
Yeah, no, I mean it's good to talk about these things, and I mean the nostalgia. It's like listening and like thinking back. It just I don't know, it feels good. It's fun.
And that's a great thing about this game. The thematic content matches so well with like the strategic component of it. It feels like Lord of the Rings, and the cards are really beautiful. So
Yeah, I 100% agree. So I think that's everything for us today, guys. Thanks so much for tuning in, and we'll see you guys next time.
thank you.